My parents never argued, not once, not in any way I witnessed growing up. They had their quiet disagreements the way most people do, a tightening around the eyes, a subject changed too quickly, a long pause before answering. But they were gentle people, private, the kind of Midwestern reserve that gets mistaken for coldness by people who don't know the difference between holding back and holding steady. Which is why the night I heard them fight is the night I have never been able to forget. I was 9 years old. It was winter. I had a bad chest cold and had been up half the night coughing, which my mother had addressed by setting me up on the couch with a quilt and a stack of nature magazines she knew I loved, the kind with the wide photographs of oceans and forests, my version of medicine. I got up somewhere around 1 in the morning for a glass of water. The kitchen light was on. I heard voices I almost did not recognize. "We can't keep pretending there's nothing to prepare him for." That was my father, and the sound of his voice hit me like something physical. He was not a man who raised his voice. If it finds him and he doesn't know anything, if you tell him, it finds him sooner. My mother, sharp and frightened in a way I had never heard. "That's what your father told you, isn't it? That the knowing is the door." The not knowing didn't protect him either. A long silence. "We don't have to tell him everything," my father said. His voice had dropped, but I could still hear it in the way you hear things you are not supposed to. "We just can't leave him with nothing." I went back to the couch without my glass of water. I lay under the quilt with the magazine open on my chest and listened to my parents talk in voices too low to make out for another half hour, and then the kitchen light went off. The next morning my mother told me that my grandfather and grandmother had both died. They were in their mid-60s. She did not say how. She did not say together, but I understood from the way she said it and from the night before that it had been at the same time. I filed the whole thing somewhere in the back of my mind, the way children file things that are too large to examine and too strange to dismiss. And there it sat for 19 years. My name is Elliot. I grew up in rural Minnesota, moved to a small town in eastern South Dakota after university, and built myself something that qualified as a quiet life. I worked remotely doing technical writing for a software company, which suited my nature. I had a good friend named Cass who lived 20 minutes away and who I had known since a literature class we had both accidentally enrolled in during our first week at the same university, each of us expecting something entirely different. I had a dog named Fig, a 3-year-old mixed breed with one permanently upright ear and one permanently folded, who considered himself the primary resident of my house and tolerated my presence with good humor. I was 31 when my parents died. Both of them, same day. The police officer who called me was kind and careful with her words, and I could tell she had done this before, and I could also tell that something about this particular call was making her careful in a different way than usual. She did not have a clear cause. She said she would be in touch. She gave me a number to call. I drove the 4 hours to my parents' house in a state that I can only describe as the absence of a state. I made arrangements. I received condolences from people I had not seen in years. I handled everything that needed handling because there was no one else to handle it, and because keeping my hands occupied kept the rest of me from arriving at where I would eventually have to arrive. 3 weeks after the funeral, going through the last of the boxes in my parents' study, I found the envelope. My name on the front, my father's handwriting. Inside was a single folded page and a smaller envelope sealed with the word "later" written on it in my mother's hand. The page read, "Elliot, if you are reading this, we have gone. If it happened the way we feared it might, then you need to understand that what found us is real, and that it has found our family before. We do not know if it will come for you. We hope, with everything we have, that it stops with us, but we could not leave you with nothing. When the day comes, you will know it. Do not look for it. It will be unmistakable. On that day, do these things. Light a fire, a real one, wood and flame. Burn the cedar resin. It is in the tin in this box. Burn it in the fire. Stay by the fire. Do not leave the light. We love you more than you will ever fully understand. You have been the best thing in our lives. Please be safe. Open the second envelope when the day comes, not before." The cedar resin tin was in the box, as promised. Small, dark, smelling faintly of forests and something older. I set it on my kitchen counter when I got home. I put the second envelope in the drawer by my bed. I read my father's letter 4 more times, and then folded it carefully and put it in my wallet, which is where it has lived ever since. I did not tell Cass everything immediately. I told her my parents had left me some unusual instructions and that I was trying to understand them. She listened without pushing, which is one of the things about her that I have always been grateful for. Months passed, almost a year. My life resumed its shape. Fig grew another inch and decided the couch was his. I finished a long project at work and started a new one. I drove to see Cass most weekends. I kept the cedar tin by the fireplace and the envelope in the drawer and tried not to think too hard about either. The thinking found me anyway, at odd hours. The night in the kitchen when I was 9, my grandfather and grandmother dying at the same time, my parents dying at the same time. The phrase "the knowing is the door," which I had carried for 22 years without understanding it. The fact that my father had still chosen to leave a letter. He had known the risk and left the letter anyway. That meant he believed the preparation was worth the risk. That meant the alternative to knowing was worse. I tried to trust that. The day arrived on a Thursday in early October. I woke before my alarm, which was unusual. Fig was sitting on the floor beside the bed, which was also unusual. He was not moving. He was looking at this bedroom door with the focused, unreadable attention that dogs give to things that exist just outside human perception. I lay there for a moment, watching him. Then I went to the kitchen to make coffee. On the back step, arranged with a neatness that felt deliberate, were 3 dead moths, large ones. The kind I had been watching since childhood, the ones my mother used to point out on summer evenings, pressing themselves against the porch light with their wings perfectly still. My mother had loved moths. She had talked about them my whole childhood, their navigation, their relationship to light, the way they oriented themselves by the moon, and had been confused by human fire for thousands of years. She had a small framed print of them above her reading chair. When I was very small, she used to say that moths were proof that beautiful things could be drawn toward what would hurt them and still remain beautiful. 3 moths, dead, arranged. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Fig sat in the doorway. I knew. I opened the second envelope. We don't know everything. We gathered what we could from what your grandparents left us and from what happened to others in the family before that. What follows is the pattern we found. The fire slows it down. We don't know why. Everyone who stayed near a living fire survived longer than those who didn't, sometimes hours longer. Electric light appears to have no effect. It has to be real fire, wood and flame. The cedar resin adds something. Our best estimate is another hour, maybe more. Burn it throughout the night, not all at once. Do not use your phone after dark on that day. Everyone who made calls did not last as long as those who stayed silent. We don't understand this either. Do not leave the light. This is the most consistent factor in everything we found. Those who stepped away from the fire, even briefly, for any reason, did not come back. You are not the only one. There are others in the region who carry this the same way we carried it. They may find you, or you may find them. The easternmost fire is where we were told to meet. Your grandfather's instructions. We don't know if it still holds. We have written everything we know in a journal. It is taped to the underside of the kitchen table. Take it out. Read it tonight. Light the fire. Burn the cedar. Stay in the light. You are our greatest joy. Be safe. Be brave. Come home in the morning. The journal was where they said it would be. 40 pages in my mother's handwriting, organized and precise. She had been thorough in the way she was thorough about everything she cared about. I read it in 2 hours, sitting at the kitchen table with Fig pressed against my feet. By late afternoon I had the fireplace going and the cedar resin tin open on the hearth. The smell was sharp and clean and deep, like standing in old forest. I'd set up the guest room with extra wood, a blanket, water, food. I did not know if I would need it for myself or for someone else. At around 5, someone knocked. He was perhaps 40, heavy-set, wearing a canvas work jacket that had seen considerable use. He had a quality of stillness about him that I recognized immediately as the stillness of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has learned to hold it without showing the effort. He had a name, Warren. He told me in a few short sentences. His mother had died the same day as my parents. He had been given instructions that led him east, to the outer edge of the county, to the house with a fire. He had a folded paper in his breast pocket and a canvas duffel bag over his shoulder. He looked at my fireplace through the open door. "You've got cedar burning," he said. "Yes." My mother's instructions mentioned cedar. He paused. She also mentioned a journal. "Mine too." We looked at each other for a moment with the particular recognition of people who have arrived at the same strange conclusion from different directions. "Come in," I said. Warren spread his own papers on the kitchen table alongside my journal. His mother had kept records too, less organized than mine, but dense with detail going back 3 generations. Between the 2 sets of documents, the picture became sharper and more complete. Their family and mine had intersected once before, at a gathering after our grandparents' deaths. A meeting in someone's living room in the late 1990s. Our parents, then in their 30s, had gathered with 6 or 7 others to compare what they knew. They had pooled their data the way scientists pool data, each person contributing their portion of the pattern. The results were in both journals from different perspectives, telling the same story. Fire extended survival significantly. Cedar resin added time. Wool fabric, worn close to the body, added a smaller but consistent margin. Silence after dark appeared to matter, and the fire could be killed or made unreliable if whatever was coming decided to focus on it. That was the detail that had not been fully solved. The fire could be countered. Whatever the thing was, it had some relationship to fire that was not simple fear. It avoided fire, but it could also, under certain conditions, extinguish it. "How do you keep the fire alive if it can put it out?" Warren asked. He was reading the same passage I was thinking about. "My parents didn't solve that," I said. "They said the last page of the journal was the closest anyone got." The last page was my mother's handwriting, but more careful than the rest, as though she had written it slowly, choosing every word. "We believe the fire is not the protection itself. We believe the fire is a signal to it, a boundary it recognizes, but like any boundary, it can be tested and worn down. The thing that seems to matter most is not the fire's size, but its origin. A fire that has been tended, that someone has stayed with, fed, maintained, holds differently than one simply lit and left. The intention behind the tending may matter as much as the flame itself. We cannot prove this. We observed it. What we know with certainty, do not let the fire go out, whatever you have to do." Warren read it twice. Then he set it down and looked at the fire in the grate. "She sounds like someone I would have liked," he said. "She was," I said. Darkness came early in October. By 7, the fields outside the windows were black, and the fireplace was the primary light in the room. Warren had taken the couch. Fig had stationed himself precisely halfway between Warren and me, the way dogs do when they are trying to monitor 2 people at once. Warren's duffel bag had contained, among other practical items, a good supply of firewood that his mother's instructions had told him to bring. We added it to my supply and calculated that we had enough to last well past dawn if we were careful. At around 9, Fig stood up. He did not bark. He faced the north window and stood very still with his ears at their most different, one up and one down, and his whole body concentrated into listening. Warren and I looked at each other. Then we heard it. Not clearly at first, more like a quality of the night outside changing, the way the air changes before a storm. A pressure shift you feel before you identify it as anything specific. Then something that might have been footsteps, if footsteps were made by something that had not fully settled on how many feet to use. Irregular, heavy in some beats and very light in others, the rhythm of a gait that did not belong to anything I had a name for. "Don't go near the windows," Warren said, very quiet. I wasn't going to. We stayed by the fire. The cedar was burning steadily. The smell had changed as the night deepened, richer now, with something underneath it that was not quite cedar anymore, something older and more particular. I added another piece of wood. The flames caught it immediately, brightening the room. The sound outside paused. For perhaps 3 minutes there was nothing. Then it resumed, further away, circling. Fig tracked it with his ears without moving his body. At just after 11, the fire dimmed. Not gradually. It dropped the way a flame drops when a window opens. A sudden reduction that had nothing to do with the wood or the airflow in the room. The room went noticeably darker. The cedar smell thinned. Warren was on his feet before I fully processed what was happening. "More resin," he said. "Now." I grabbed the tin and tipped a significant amount directly onto the flames. For a moment nothing happened, and the room continued to darken, and something in my chest tightened to a point that I had not felt before. Then the cedar caught and the fire surged, a bright, sharp flare that filled the room with orange light and a wave of that deep forest smell. Outside something made a sound. Not a scream, not anything I could map to a known animal, a sound that seemed to belong to something larger than its source, as though the thing making it existed in more dimensions than its voice could entirely reach through. It moved away from the house, quickly, the irregular footfalls fading into the fields. Fig sat down, his breathing slowed. Warren let out a long breath and sat back on the couch. Neither of us said anything for a while. "The fire," I said eventually. My mother was right. It notices the fire going down. "It was testing us," Warren said, "seeing what we'd do." "Or testing the boundary," I said, "seeing if it still held." He nodded. He reached into his bag and produced a thermos, offering it to me without comment. Coffee. I took it and held it with both hands and watched the fire and thought about my parents in their last night somewhere, their own fire, their own version of this same vigil. They had not made it to morning, but they had made it long enough to leave the journal, long enough to leave the letter, long enough to give me a chance at a morning they did not have. The night continued its slow work. At around 1, the sound returned briefly from the south field and then moved on. At 2:30, Fig got up from his position, walked to the fireplace, turned 3 times with great deliberateness, and lay down directly in front of it. Warren and I both watched this with something approaching gratitude. Fig had made a decision about where the safest place in the room was and had communicated it in the clearest way available to him. We moved our chairs closer to the fireplace. The cedar tin was nearly empty by 3. I had been rationing it, burning a small amount every 40 minutes through the night. What was left I burned slowly, letting it sit on the coals and produce its thin curl of smoke for as long as possible. At 4 in the morning, Warren fell asleep sitting up, which I considered a reasonable decision, and one that I chose not to imitate for the same reason one person stays awake during a long night drive. Someone had to watch the fire. I watched it and fed it and watched it and thought about my father's handwriting on the envelope and my mother's careful last page and the 3 moths on the back step arranged with a neatness that felt like a message. And I thought about what message it might have been. I loved these things. I'm showing you that I was here. Remember what light is for. That is the interpretation I chose. I am aware it may not be correct, but it is the one I have kept. Dawn came the way it always comes in October, slowly and grey, and then by degrees itself. The fire was low but alive. The cedar was gone. Fig was still in front of the hearth, one ear up and one ear down. Warren woke at first light with the abrupt self-possession of someone who had learned to sleep lightly and return to full consciousness quickly, a skill that I suspected had been developed recently. We sat with our coffee and watched the light come up across the fields. No fire had appeared in the distance the night before. If there were others out there who carried what we carried, they had not come, or they had managed their own fire in their own place. I hoped that was the case. I had no way to know. Warren and I stayed for most of the morning, speaking carefully and then more freely as the light made the conversation feel more ordinary. He had 2 children, he told me, a son in his early teens and a daughter who was 8. His mother had given him a second envelope for each of them, to be opened on their day. He had them in a fireproof box at home. "Did you read them?" I asked. "No," he said. "She said not to." "What will you do?" He turned his coffee mug in his hands. "What my mother did. What your parents did. What all of them did. Try to give them enough to have a chance. Try not to give them so much that it finds them sooner." "The knowing is the door," I said. He looked at me. "What?" "Something my mother said once, years ago. I didn't understand it at the time." "Do you understand it now?" I thought about it for a moment. "I think so," I said. "The knowing lets it locate you, but the not knowing leaves you with nothing when it comes anyway. There's no perfect answer. You just choose how much to give them, and you hope it's the right amount." Warren nodded slowly. "That sounds about right." He left after lunch. We exchanged numbers. We have met several times since in ordinary daylight for ordinary reasons, talking about ordinary things and occasionally about the other kind. He is a careful, thoughtful person, and I'm glad the night put us in the same room. I have written everything I know into a new document, clearer and more organized than my parents' journal, drawing on both sets of records. I have kept my parents' journal and Warren's mother's papers. I have a cedar tin with a reliable supplier now. I keep the fireplace maintained. I have also, for reasons I cannot entirely explain but do not question, started paying attention to moths. Not obsessively, just noticing, the way my mother taught me to notice them, as creatures that navigate by distant light and have been confused by human fire for as long as humans have made fire. Beautiful things drawn toward what might hurt them. I think about what it means to be the fire instead of the moth, to be the thing that holds light rather than the thing searching for it. I think about my parents choosing to leave the letter knowing the risk, choosing to give me the cedar tin and the instructions and the second envelope. choosing to believe that a prepared person had a better chance than an ignorant one, even when the knowing itself was part of the danger. I have not had another night like that one. I do not know if I will. But if I wake some morning to find 3 moths arranged on my back step with a neatness that feels like a message from someone who loved them, I will know what to do. I will light the fire, I will burn the cedar, I will stay by the light, and I will make it to morning, because that is what I promised them. My 7-year-old daughter and I moved in with my father 3 weeks ago. Dad lives in northern Wisconsin, an hour outside of Green Bay, in the same house where I grew up. 2 stories, a covered porch, birch trees crowding the back fence. When my marriage fell apart and I needed somewhere to land, he offered without hesitation and without conditions, which is exactly what my father is like. He does not make speeches, he just opens the door. What I was not prepared for was the basement. He had converted it into a children's playroom while we were driving up. I knew he was doing something down there. I did not know the scale. My daughter Nola saw it before I did. She went down the stairs ahead of me and made a sound I had never heard from her before. This high, sustained note of pure disbelief. I followed her down and stopped on the bottom step. The ceiling was low and the space was large, and every inch of it had been transformed. A wooden platform structure dominated the center of the room, raised on thick legs with a rope ladder and a fireman's pole. A tunnel slide in deep orange connected it to a sandpit filled with foam blocks. The walls were painted floor to ceiling with murals, a deep sea scene on the north wall, bioluminescent fish and drifting jellyfish, and the dark shapes of things barely visible in the deep water. The east wall was a dense jungle, green and layered, animals half hidden in the undergrowth. The south wall was a winter scene, a village of lights and distant mountains. The west wall I could not immediately identify. It seemed to be a cave, stalactites and a subterranean river, something moving in the painted water just below the surface. In one corner, a small wooden reading nook with cushioned walls. In another, a dress-up rack dense with costumes. On the far wall, a low shelf lined with soft toys and books, and a collection of glass figurines that caught what light there was and scattered it in small bright spots across the floor. The lighting was poor, 4 bulbs in simple metal fittings, one of them flickering slightly. The murals, brilliant in full light I imagined, sat in a kind of half-shadow that made the deep-sea fish look a little too alive and the things in the cave wall painting a little too close to the surface. Nola was already at the rope ladder. "Dad," I said, when he appeared behind me on the stairs, "this is incredible." He shrugged in the way he shrugs when he is pleased, but does not want to be fussed over. "Had some time. Figured she'd need something to do in the winters." "You painted those murals?" He looked away. "I had help." I studied the deep-sea wall more closely. It was not quite professional, but it was far better than any artwork I had seen my father produce. The jellyfish in particular had a quality of movement to them that I found difficult to look away from. "Who helped you?" "A woman from the next county," he said. "She was looking to get rid of things. I got all the equipment from her too. The platform, the slide, the foam blocks. Her boy had passed. She wanted it to go somewhere it would be used." I looked around at the foam blocks, the dress-up rack, the figurines on the shelf, all of it used, all of it belonging to someone who was no longer here to use it. I told myself it was a generous thing to do, giving this to a child who needed something to come home to. I told myself that, and I went upstairs and made dinner, and I listened to Nola play below me with her whole heart. The first week was better than I had any right to expect. Nola had been subdued for months. The process of the separation, the packing, the leaving of the only home she had ever known, had drawn her inward in a way that concerned me deeply. She was not a dramatic child, and she did not cry often, but she had stopped asking questions, which was worse. Nola's questions had been a constant of her life since she learned to talk. Why do birds point into the wind? Where do waves go when they hit the shore? What is the name for the smell before rain? In the playroom, the questions came back. She wanted to know the names of the deep-sea fish on the north wall. She wanted to know which animals were hidden in the jungle. She had opinions about the winter village, which mountain she would climb, which lit window she would knock on if she were cold. Dad answered everything he could, and I filled in the rest, and for the first time in months I watched my daughter simply be 7 years old. Then, on the 9th day, she fell asleep in the foam block pit. I had left her for 20 minutes. I came back down the stairs calling her name. No answer. I checked the reading nook, the dress-up corner, behind the platform structure. I opened the small door set into the base of the platform, which she used as a den, and found her books and her favourite soft rabbit, but not Nola. I felt the specific cold of a parent who cannot locate their child. Then I saw the foam blocks move. Just slightly. The smallest disruption, like something settling beneath the surface. I crossed the room and pushed my hands into the blocks, calling her name. The pit was deeper than I had understood. The blocks came up past my elbows. When my hands found her, she was curled at the bottom, and for one moment that I will not fully describe, I thought she was not breathing. She was. She was deeply, profoundly asleep, with the boneless abandon of a child who has been asleep for some time. I pulled her up and held her and said her name until she opened her eyes. "I was tired," she said, looking at me with complete calm. "How did all the blocks get on top of you?" She thought about it. "I covered myself up," she said, "like a blanket." I took her to the urgent care clinic in town, where the doctor on duty told me that children fell asleep in unusual places regularly, particularly during periods of stress and transition. He checked her eyes and her reflexes and told me she was perfectly fine. I drove home in silence, watching her in the rearview mirror. She fell asleep again before we reached the house. "I want to know who helped you paint the murals," I said to my father that evening. He was cleaning up after dinner, his back to me. "Why?" "Because they're very good. Because you said a woman whose son had died gave you all that equipment. I just want to understand the situation." He turned around. His expression was careful in the way it gets when he is deciding what to tell me and what to hold back. He has always believed in protecting me from things he considers his to carry, which is both the best and most frustrating thing about him. "She was very insistent," he said. "When I said I was setting up a room for Nola, she wanted to be involved. She drove up here twice. She painted most of the walls herself." "What was her son's name?" A pause. "She called him Pip. I don't know if that was his real name." "How old was he when he died?" 7, I think. Maybe 8. I looked at the basement door. "What did he die of?" My father turned back to the sink. "She didn't go into detail. Something that had been developing for a long time," she said. "She mentioned that at the end he wasn't quite himself." I stood there with that phrase for a moment. At the end he wasn't quite himself. "I want her contact information," I said. He dried his hands on the towel. "I'll see if I can find it." 3 days later, I found the shoes. I had been doing a thorough clean of the playroom, partly for peace of mind and partly because the flickering bulb had finally died and I was replacing all 4 with better fixtures. While I was checking the storage space built into the base of the platform, behind where Nola kept her rabbit and her books, I found a pair of small Wellington boots, yellow, with a pattern of dark green frogs along the shaft. Child-sized, maybe a year smaller than Nola's current size. I set them on the workbench and looked at them. They were not new. The soles were worn in the way children wear out the soles of boots they wear constantly. One had a small crack in the shaft near the top. They had been loved into their current state. I brought them upstairs and showed my father. "From the equipment, I expect," he said. "Must have been in with the rest of it. Did this woman send you anything else that belonged to her son? Clothes? Shoes?" "Not intentionally," he said. I put the boots in the outside bin. Then I went back inside, and I could not fully explain why my hands were shaking. Nola began to change around the 2nd week. Not in any way I could point to clearly. She still came to me for hugs. She still asked her questions. But something in the texture of her had shifted. She was slower to laugh. She sometimes stopped in the middle of a sentence and looked at a point in the middle distance for long enough that I would say her name twice before she came back. She stopped asking about the deep-sea fish. She stopped asking about the jungle animals. She became interested in the cave wall on the west side of the basement, the one I found hardest to look at directly. She spent long stretches crouching in front of it, her face a few inches from the painted surface, looking at the thing in the water beneath the stalactites. "What are you looking at, Bug?" I asked her one afternoon. "The swimmer," she said. "Which swimmer?" "In the water," she pointed. "He's been getting closer." I looked at the mural. The subterranean river ran low across the wall, painted in dark greens and blues. There was something beneath the surface. I had noticed it before, roughly humanoid, indistinct, far from the riverbank. "Do you know who painted this?" I asked her. She shook her head, still looking at the wall. Do you ever feel strange down here? I asked. Does anything feel wrong? She turned and looked at me with an expression I could not fully read. No, she said. It feels like home. I went upstairs and called the urgent care clinic and made an appointment. The doctor this visit was different from the first. He was thorough and careful. He ran blood tests. He checked her reflexes and her responses and her coordination. At the end of the appointment, he told me that she was in excellent physical health and that the behavioral changes I was describing were consistent with the adjustment period following major life disruption. He recommended routine, sleep, time outside, patience. I drove home and sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before I went inside. My father finally found the contact information for the woman. Her name was Ruth Calloway. She lived in a town called Breslau, 70 miles south. I called the number on a Thursday morning while Nola was at school and my father was at his woodworking group in town. The phone rang 9 times before someone picked up. Hello? A woman's voice, soft and precise. Is this Ruth Calloway? A pause. Who's asking? I explained who I was, my father's name, the equipment, the murals, the room she had helped create. Ah, she said, just that. I wanted to thank you, I said. It's a beautiful space. My daughter loves it. Another pause, longer this time. How is she? The woman asked. Your daughter? She's well? She's adjusting. I hesitated. I found a pair of yellow Wellington boots. Frog pattern. Were those Pips? The sound that came through the phone was small and complicated. Yes, she said. I didn't mean to include those. I'm sorry. It's fine. I just wanted to return them if you wanted them back. No, she said, very quickly. Then, more carefully. No, thank you. I don't need them. I sat with the phone against my ear and listened to the distance between us. Can I ask you something? I said. You can ask. You painted those murals yourself. Most of them. The cave wall, the west wall, with the swimmer in the water.
Silence.
Why that one? I asked. A very long pause. That was Pip's choice, she said finally. He asked me to paint it. What is it? What's in the water? I don't know, she said. He described it to me and I painted what he described. I always thought he had a vivid imagination. A breath. Mrs. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Lena? Lena, how long has your daughter been sleeping in the foam pit? My hands went cold. How did you know about that? Pip started sleeping there, she said, at the bottom. He said it was the best sleep he'd ever had. When did he start doing that? Maybe 3 weeks after we got everything set up. Her voice was very controlled in the way voices get when they have been practicing control for a long time. Lena, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer me honestly. Okay. Has your daughter started eating differently? Foods she wouldn't eat before, things she used to dislike. My mouth went dry. Nola, 2 nights ago, finishing a full bowl of the potato and leek soup she had refused every previous time my father made it, looking up at him with an expression I had taken for politeness, asking for more. Why are you asking me that? I said. Ruth Calloway was quiet for a moment. In the last month before Pip died, she said, he ate soup. He had never eaten soup in his life. He hated it, the smell of it, the texture, all of it. Her voice was perfectly steady, and steadiness, I understood then, was the only thing holding her together. At the end, he asked for it every night. What are you telling me? I said. It was not a question. I don't know what I'm telling you, she said. I don't know what happened to my son. The doctors don't know what happened to my son. And I painted that room and gave that equipment away because I thought it was the right thing to do for a child who would use it. A pause. I think I made a mistake. I was already moving toward the basement stairs. The cave wall, I said. The swimmer. What did Pip say it was? He said it was a boy who lived in the water. He said the boy was lonely. He said the boy wanted to come up and be warm. Her breath caught. He said he was going to help him. I threw open the basement door. Ruth, I said, I need to know everything. From the beginning, I need to know everything you know. The basement was dark below me. The staircase light was on, and I could see the bottom steps, and beyond them the edge of the foam pit, and the faint scatter of reflected light from the figurines on the shelf. On the bottom step, just inside the light, sat a pair of yellow Wellington boots with a pattern of dark green frogs along the shaft. The ones I had put in the outside bin 2 days ago. Lena, Ruth Calloway said softly, from a long way away, is your daughter home from school yet? I looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. She was not due home for another 40 minutes. From the basement, I heard the sound of something moving in the foam pit. Ruth, I said, I have to go. Don't go into the basement alone, she said immediately. Please, not alone. Wake your father. He's not here. Then wait outside, Lena. But I was already on the stairs. The basement was cold, colder than it should have been with the door open and the kitchen heat behind me. Each step down felt like a degree dropped. By the time I reached the bottom, my breath was misting in front of me. The foam pit was still. The figurines on the shelf scattered their small lights. The jellyfish on the north wall floated in their painted dark. The jungle kept its secrets. The winter village glowed with its distant lit windows. I turned to the west wall. The cave painting, the stalactites, the subterranean river running low and dark across the lower third of the wall. The swimmer was different. I had looked at this wall a dozen times. I knew where the painted figure was. It had been far from the bank, a shape barely visible, the suggestion of arms, a pale face turned upward toward the painted surface of the water. It was at the bank now. One painted hand reaching up above the waterline, fingers spread against the stone edge. A face no longer looking up, looking out. I stood very still in the cold basement and looked at the painting, and the painting's figure looked back at me with pale, wide eyes the color of still water. From the foam pit, a sound, soft and slow, the sound of blocks settling. I did not look away from the wall. I know you're there, I said. My voice was level in a way I would not have predicted. I know what you've been doing. The blocks settled again. You are not welcome here, I said. Whatever you are, whatever you want, this is not your home and she is not yours.
Silence.
She has a mother, I said. She has a grandfather. She has a life she is going to live. You do not get to take that from her. The temperature in the room dropped further. My breath came in fast, short clouds. Then, from somewhere behind me, very small, very clear, the sound of the kitchen door opening. Nola's voice calling out, "Mum, I got off the bus early. The driver let me, Mum." Her footsteps in the kitchen, the specific sound of her weight and her rhythm, her voice and the particular way she said Mum, 2 syllables, the way she had said it since she was 3. My daughter. "Down here," I called. "Stay up there. Bug, stay in the kitchen. Okay? I'll be up in 1 minute." "Okay," she called back. "Grammy said I could have an apple." "You can have an apple." My eyes stayed on the wall. "I'm coming up right now." The figure in the painting had not moved. But the hand on the bank was open now, palm up, in the gesture of something waiting to be helped across. I held its gaze for one more moment. Then I turned and walked up the stairs and closed the basement door behind me and locked it and put the key in my pocket. Nola ate her apple at the kitchen table and told me about her day at school. A boy in her class had brought a salamander. They had been learning about weather. She had made a friend named Daria who liked the same books she liked. I sat across from her and listened to every word. My father came home an hour later. I told him everything, including what Ruth Calloway had told me. He listened without interrupting, in the way he listens to serious things, with his hands flat on the table and his eyes steady. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want the west wall painted over," I said. "All of it, tomorrow." "Okay." "And I want the foam pit out of the basement. All of it, tomorrow." "Okay." "And I want you to call Ruth Calloway and find out if there is anything else she knows, anything she didn't tell me." "Okay." He paused. "What about the rest of it? The platform, the slide, the other walls?" I thought about Nola on the rope ladder, asking about the deep-sea fish, the questions that had come back to her, the sound of her playing below me with her whole heart. "The rest stays," I said, "for now." That night I checked on Nola 3 times before I slept. Each time she was exactly as she should be, sprawled across her bed with the particular comfortable disorder of a child who sleeps deeply and without care. The 3rd time I checked, she opened one eye and looked at me. "Mum," she said. "Yes." "The swimmer is gone." I stood very still in the doorway. "What swimmer? Bug?" "The one in the cave painting," she said. "He was there for a while. I was talking to him sometimes." My heart was very loud. "What did you talk about?" She closed her eye. "He was sad," she said. "He wanted to come up and be warm. I told him I couldn't help him with that." A pause, the pause of a child drifting back to sleep. I told him he should find his own way. She was asleep before I could say anything else. I stood in her doorway for a long time, listening to the house settle around us, and the birch trees moving outside against the dark winter sky, and my daughter breathing the long, slow breath of the completely uncomplicated, entirely herself. The west wall came down the next morning. My father painted over it in 2 coats of pale grey. By afternoon you could not tell what had been there. Nola watched from the stairs, eating toast. "What are you going to paint instead?" she asked. My father looked at me. I looked at Nola. "What would you like?" I asked. She thought about it for a moment. "Sunrise," she said, "from the top of a mountain, so it goes all the way across." My father nodded. He went to get his brushes. I sat on the bottom step beside Nola and ate half her toast and looked at the grey wall and thought about all the things a room can hold and all the things you can choose to put in it instead. Outside, the birch trees were bare and white against the Wisconsin winter. Spring was a long way off, but it was coming. I do not like centipedes. I want to be clear about that from the start, because everything that follows is going to sound like the story of someone who likes centipedes, and I need you to understand that I do not. I have never liked them. I will never like them. The way they move, that horrible fluid ripple of 100 legs all going at slightly different times, is the single most unnecessary thing nature has produced, and I say that as someone who has seen a full-grown pelican up close. But I do not kill them. My grandmother is responsible for this. She was a small, practical woman from rural Oregon who kept an immaculate garden and had strong opinions about the role every creature played in the balance of things. When I was 6 years old, she caught me trying to step on an earwig, and she sat me down and gave me a 10-minute lecture about the food chain that I still think about regularly. The rule was simple. If something has crawled into your space without invitation, you escort it out without harm. Cup and paper. Outside. Done. She never specified a size limit, which would become relevant later. I grew up, moved out, got a job doing graphic design for a mid-sized marketing firm, and ended up renting a 1-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building in Portland that had good light and terrible insulation. The kind of place that got cold in October and stayed cold until May, and where every autumn you could count on finding a variety of small creatures who had made the same calculation I had about the warmth-to-cost ratio. I kept my grandmother's rule: cup and paper, bust them outside, try not to look too closely at the thing in the cup. The centipede showed up in November. I was making coffee. It came out from behind the refrigerator, which is where they always come from, as though refrigerators are some kind of dimensional portal specifically for horrible insects. It was a house centipede, the long-legged kind, the kind that looks like someone drew a line and then got carried away, adding detail on both sides. It stopped in the middle of my kitchen floor and sat there doing nothing, which is the most unsettling thing a centipede can do, because you know they are capable of moving very fast, and the fact that they are choosing not to means they are thinking. I got a cup. I got a piece of cardboard from the recycling. I approached slowly. It did not move. I placed the cup over it. It did not fight me. I slid the cardboard underneath, walked it to the window, and released it onto the fire escape. "There you go," I said to no one. That was October. November. December passed with no incidents, no centipedes, no cockroaches, barely even a fruit fly. My apartment was, for the first time since I had moved in, entirely pest-free. I remember thinking I should find out what the building had sprayed and ask them to do it again. I did not make the connection. I should have made the connection. The smell woke me up in January. It was a Saturday morning, overcast and cold, and I was deeply committed to sleeping until 9. Instead, I was awake at 7:15 because something smelled incredible, and it was coming from my kitchen. My first thought was that I was still dreaming. My second thought was that my downstairs neighbor was cooking something extraordinary, and the smell was coming through the vents. My third thought, arriving as I walked into my kitchen and turned on the light, was considerably harder to process. The centipede was on my stove. Except it was not the centipede I had released in November. That one had been perhaps 3 inches long. This one was close to 2 feet. Its legs spanning the width of the burner, it was standing over with several legs to spare. Its body had the same amber-brown coloring I remembered, but it had a density now, a presence that the November version had not. It was stirring something in my small saucepan with what I can only describe as focused professional attention. It heard me come in. I know this because all of its front legs swiveled toward me simultaneously in a way that should not be anatomically possible, and that I will see when I close my eyes for the rest of my life. "Good morning," it said. Its voice was soft and slightly rasping, like a radio station that is almost in tune. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Not intentionally, my legs simply stopped working and I ended up on the tile, which was cold, and I stayed there for what felt like a reasonable amount of time given the circumstances. "You should sit at the table," it said. "This is nearly ready." I got up. I sat at the table. I want to be honest with you, I do not fully know why I did this. I think my brain, faced with a situation it had no framework for, defaulted to the most recent instruction it had received, which was sit at the table. The human mind is remarkable in its commitment to social norms under pressure. The centipede, moving with that fluid, horrible ripple but somehow managing to make it look purposeful rather than nightmarish, carried the saucepan from the stove to the counter and ladled something into a bowl. It used, I noticed, a ladle it had taken from my utensil drawer. It brought the bowl to the table by walking along the counter, then the wall, then the table leg, and set it in front of me. It was oatmeal, steel cut from the look of it, topped with sliced banana and what appeared to be a small drizzle of honey. I do not own steel-cut oats or honey. "Where did you get these ingredients?" I asked, because apparently that was my priority. "The drawer by the stove," it said. "You had them at the back." I did not remember buying steel-cut oats. I did not know I owned honey. Clearly at some point I had aspirations about my breakfast habits that I had then abandoned and forgotten about. I stared at the oatmeal. "Are you going to eat it?" it asked. "I'm working up to it," I said. It waited, which was patient of it. I took a spoonful. The oatmeal was perfectly cooked, that specific texture where it has enough bite to it that you know it is real food, but it is not so dense it feels like a punishment. The banana had been sliced on a diagonal, which was a detail I found both unnecessary and impressive. The honey was exactly the right amount. "This is very good," I said, despite everything. The centipede's front legs lifted slightly, which I would later learn was its version of nodding. "Thank you," it said. "I watched a video." "A video?" "On the tablet, in your bedroom. You left it open on a cooking channel." I thought about this. I did have a cooking channel I had bookmarked and never actually watched. Apparently, it had found a more dedicated audience. "I see," I said. I finished the oatmeal because it was genuinely excellent, and also because I did not know what else to do. I spent the rest of that morning sitting on my couch trying to have a rational thought. The centipede had retreated to a corner of the kitchen ceiling, where it sat with a stillness that I found both reassuring and unnerving. It was not threatening me. It was not doing anything remotely threatening. It had made me breakfast and asked how I was going to eat it, which is more consideration than several humans I have lived with have shown me. But it was 2 feet long, and it was a centipede, and it was in my apartment, and it had somehow, through a process I did not understand and was not sure I wanted to, learned to cook oatmeal from a YouTube tutorial. I called my friend Derek. "There is a giant centipede in my apartment," I said. "How giant?" he said. 2 feet. A pause. "Is it dead?" "No, it made me breakfast." Another pause. A longer one. "I'm going to need you to say that again." I said it again. Derek was quiet for a moment, and then he said, very carefully, "The way people talk to someone they are not sure is having a breakdown. Have you been sleeping okay?" I slept fine until the smell of oatmeal woke me up. "Right, okay. How much did you have to drink last night?" 2 beers. Derek. It made oatmeal, with steel-cut oats I did not know I owned, and it talked to me. It talked. It said good morning.
Silence.
"Derek, I'm here. I'm just processing." He did not come over. He said he would call me back, and then he texted me 20 minutes later to ask if I had considered that I might be having some sort of episode. I thanked him for his concern and put my phone down. I looked at the centipede on the ceiling. "My friend thinks I'm having a breakdown," I said. "Are you?" it asked. "I genuinely don't know," I said. "What is your name?" A pause. "I don't have one." "Can I give you one?" Another pause, longer. "Yes." I thought about it. "Gerald," I said. "You look like a Gerald." The front legs lifted again. "Okay," it said. That was how Gerald got his name. I called the building manager the following Monday and told her I had a significant pest problem in my apartment. She sent someone to spray on Tuesday. I stayed at Derek's that night, telling him only that there was a bug situation I was dealing with and not elaborating when he pressed me. I came back Wednesday morning. The apartment was immaculate. I mean that literally. The dishes were done, the counters had been wiped, my laundry, which had been accumulating on the chair in my bedroom for 2 weeks in the way laundry does when you live alone, had been washed, folded, and stacked on the dresser. The floor had been swept. The bathroom mirror, which had not been properly cleaned since I moved in, was spotless. Gerald was on the ceiling. "The men came," he said. "Did the spray bother you?" "No," he said simply. I looked at the folded laundry. "Did you do all of this?" "Yes, including the laundry." "You had a lot of it. There were 3 loads." I stood in my clean apartment trying to decide how to feel about a 2-foot centipede having handled my laundry situation. "Gerald," I said, "I have to be honest with you. I called them because I was trying to get rid of you." The front legs did not lift. He was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to be," he said. "I expected it." I sat down on my clean couch, on a cushion that had been plumped and straightened, and thought about what my grandmother would say about this situation. She would probably say something practical and slightly infuriating, like, "Well, is he causing you harm?" And I would have to say no. And she would say, "Does he seem to mean you harm?" And I would have to say no. And she would give me that look she had. The one that said the answer you're looking for is fairly obvious if you'd stop looking so hard at the wrong part of it. "You cleaned my apartment," I said. "Yes, and made me oatmeal." "I can make other things," he said. "I found a video about frittatas." "Gerald, why are you doing this?" He was quiet for a moment. When he answered, his voice had a quality I had not heard in it before, something careful and considered, the way someone talks when they are saying something they have thought about for a long time. "You are the first person who didn't try to kill me," he said. "When I was small, you took me outside." I thought about November, the cup, the fire escape, myself saying there you go to no one in particular. "That was you," I said. "Yes." "You came back." "Yes." I sat with that for a while. "I grew," he added, in a tone that suggested he was aware this was an understatement. "You did," I agreed. "I wanted to help, in exchange." He paused. "I have kept the other insects out. I can continue to do that. I can help with the food and the cleaning. I am very good at this cleaning. I can reach places you can't." I looked at the spotless top of my refrigerator, which I had never cleaned in 2 years of living here, and which I had not realized Gerald had apparently done. "I don't know if this is a good idea," I said. "I know," he said, "but I will be a good roommate. I don't take up much space. I don't eat much. I don't make noise." "You made a frittata's worth of noise at 7:15 on a Saturday." "I will try to be quieter," he said immediately. I put my face in my hands. I sat there for a moment. Then I looked up at Gerald on the ceiling, all of his legs arranged in that patient, waiting posture, 8-some eyes looking at me with an expression I was only just beginning to learn to read. "Gerald," I said, "this is going to be a weird arrangement." "Yes," he said. "You understand that you're a centipede?" "Yes, and I find centipedes deeply unsettling." "I know. You made a noise when you saw me the first time." "I sat on the floor." "Yes." That was because of how unsettling I found the situation. "I understand," he said. I exhaled. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about the earwig. I thought about the cold apartment and the laundry on the chair and the cooking channel I had bookmarked and never watched, and the fact that I had eaten the best oatmeal of my life this weekend, and it had been made by a centipede who had learned from a YouTube tutorial in the middle of the night while I was asleep. "Trial period," I said. 1 month. You do the chores. Keep the bugs out. Don't scare me more than necessary. I'll stop trying to have you exterminated." The front legs lifted, both sets, all the way up. If a centipede can look delighted, Gerald looked delighted. "I won't let you down," he said. He crawled rapidly across the ceiling to the kitchen and began, I realized, to look up frittata videos on my tablet, which he had propped against the fruit bowl at a viewable angle. I sat on my couch in my clean apartment and thought about calling my grandmother to tell her about the outcome of her policies. I decided she would probably just say something like, "Well, that's what kindness does," and it would be completely unhelpful and completely correct, and she would probably ask if he made a good frittata. "Gerald," I said. "Yes." "What time is the frittata going to be ready?" 40 minutes, he said. "I'm still reading about the cheese options." "Take your time," I said. I turned on the television. From the kitchen, the sound of something being carefully whisked. My new roommate. I did not know then what the future had in store for us, and I have since been told by several people that this story should end here. at the part that is still funny, but that is not what happened, so I will tell the rest of it when I can find the words. For now, Gerald makes an excellent frittata. The secret ingredient is apparently choosing the right ratio of egg to cheese, which he is very serious about. I have started buying better cheese,